By the end of the work shift, Jeff was already out of sorts. Routine work all day long, patterns, details, a picky foreman, colleagues who didn't shine with intelligence. His mother's words echoed in his mind. "Study, son, then you can choose a good profession and go to work in a suit and tie." These educational moments were always interrupted by his father's loud comments. "Sarah, why are you talking nonsense? Suit, tie, glossy shoes? You want our son to grow up to be a soft-handed man? Not while I'm alive. He'll follow in my footsteps. Working men are always needed. With a worthwhile trade in his hands, a real man will always earn a piece of meat. And meat for a man is his food and his strength. Remember what your daddy said, son." Now, standing under a hot shower in the locker room, Jeff dreamily imagined how Bonnie would serve him a plate of hearty soup with a big piece of meat at home, followed by a second course, meat again, with plenty of side dishes. His wife was an excellent cook and never disappointed him. He'd lucked out marrying a woman with a real chef's diploma, and the fact that he wouldn't let her work in her profession, well, there was no point wasting her culinary talent when he alone could eat everything. Jeff arrived home in good spirits. The enticing aroma of Bonnie's speciality cutlets wafted through the apartment, lifting his mood further. After washing his hands thoroughly, Jeff decided to play the role of strict father and called 10-year-old Amelie and 7-year-old Billy to the hall to listen to their report on school progress. He examined his eldest daughter's diary, full of A's and B's, asked about the drawing in his son's album, and upon learning it was a horse in a meadow, laughed heartily. "You'll never be Thomas Cole, that's clear enough, but no matter, don't get too excited. You'll work at Daddy's factory. Not everyone becomes an artist. Your mother and I once went to an exhibition. I'll tell you this, a scribble is a scribble. It's not a real occupation, just idle hands at work. Now run along, our mother's calling for dinner." Jeff sat at the kitchen table without asking if the others had eaten. He gazed at Bonnie with satisfaction, deciding that tonight he might favour her, fulfil his sacred male duty. That's how he always referred to intimacy with his wife, believing he was doing her an honour. Unaware of his thoughts, Bonnie went about her usual routine at the cooker. She removed his empty bowl of soup, set before her husband a pan of steaming cutlets, arranged mashed potatoes on a clean plate, and moved a bowl of salad. Surveying the table, the head of the family began calculating something in his mind. "What's all this? We were at the market together on Saturday. Meat's getting more expensive by the day, yet here we have beef soup, cutlets with potatoes, and out-of-season fresh vegetables. Am I supposed to work myself to death at the factory just to feed all my freeloaders with such extravagance? It's late fall, and instead of affordable sauerkraut, you've got fresh farm vegetables and greenery in the fridge. What am I to you, a working ox to plough endlessly, waiting for your next paycheck? Do you do nothing yourself, growing fat only? The children do nothing but study. There's only one breadwinner in this family, so remember that from now on. Starting tomorrow, meat is only for me. The children will make do with porridge, and you'll manage fine with cheap seasonal vegetables. Your cabbage stew is perfectly good. Add a couple of sausages instead of meat, and that'll do nicely. So from now on, no market any more. I will buy everything we need myself." Bonnie stopped in her tracks. The facade of her happy marriage finally collapsed before her eyes. She silently removed her apron, covered the pan of cutlets and the pot of soup with their lids, and left the kitchen. Her patience had snapped instantly, finally, and irrevocably. 12 strange years of marriage. For the sake of the children, she could raise them herself. Why had she even stepped into this family maelstrom? She had been such a pretty girl. All the boys in high school had pursued her, inviting her to movies and offering ice cream at cafes, but she always hurried home to her mother, who was already ill then. Having given birth late in life, raised a child alone, and worked 2 jobs had taken its toll. After classes in culinary school, Bonnie would rush home with fear, dreading that one day she'd unlock the door to find her mother breathless. In the end, her mother passed quietly in her sleep. Bonnie found her in the morning, wearing a peaceful smile, something that made it even more devastating. The grief was overwhelming, and soon Bonnie had been driven into marriage by profound loneliness. While practicing in the canteen, after her mother's death, she began smiling at a confident, brave guy, older than her, who came for lunch. "Oh, you're an appetizing girl. I could eat you up instead of a bun." Bonnie hadn't recognised such remarks as inappropriate, having no experience with men. His courtship was loud, his conquest swift. After just a couple of walks beneath the romantic moon and stars, he imposed to visit her for a cup of coffee. The next morning, as Bonnie served Jeff breakfast in her apartment, he praised her. "You're special, Bonnie, in every way. I never expected to be your first. Look at me carefully. We might have something here. I wouldn't turn down such a fine woman." Within months, Bonnie was pregnant. Jeff played the gentleman, bringing his girlfriend to the registry office, all proper and formal. They had a modest wedding. They settled in Bonnie's inherited apartment, where Jeff immediately declared himself head of the household. Their family life followed the old patriarchal ways. Bonnie knew little about proper marital relations. She genuinely believed that this was normal married life. The epiphany came later. She would walk in the courtyard, first with Amelie, then with Billy. Other young mothers glowed with happiness, pushing strollers near the playground, checking their watches expectantly. Soon enough their husbands would appear, bearing flowers, cakes, or other signs of affection. Jeff dismissed such gestures as foolish. He would condescendingly buy ice cream for the family in the park, strutting beside them. "Look how generous I am. I'll even buy movie tickets." He truly believed these weekend outings were enough for happiness. "Yearly seaside vacations? Don't joke," he'd say. In his opinion, one coastal trip with his young wife was sufficient. The children could go themselves once they grew up and started earning. It was enough that he fed them, clothed them, bought necessary books and toys. Some might find Jeff's character terrible, but this was precisely who he was. It started when his own father would shut the refrigerator in his mother's face, saying, "Eat what you earn. Jeff can boil himself a wiener, but don't you dare touch my meat stew." Young Jeff initially felt troubled by his father's outbursts, secretly sharing half his wiener or cutlet with his silent poor mum, or offering her bites of his chocolate. Then something shifted within him. Why share with his mother? She wasn't starving. She managed on pasta, porridge, bread and water. It wasn't quite a bad diet. "Women don't need meat at all. They don't physically work like that." The boy used to repeat his father's words in his mind. Bonnie was well acquainted with her colourless, quiet mother-in-law. The elderly woman attributed her gloominess to the hardships of widowhood. She spent her days at home, never going to the mall, movies or park. Her only entertainment was chatting with neighbours on a bench and walking to the pharmacy and grocery store. Bonnie hadn't delved much into such matters initially. She saw her mother-in-law as stiff, silent and uncommunicative, attributing it all to personality. Only later did she realise she herself was inexorably sliding toward the same bleak state. Without change, she would become equally battered. Then one day, to her horror, she recognised she had never truly loved her husband. Jeff's rudeness and greed were unbearable. Thus, she learned to avoid marital duty cleverly by feeding him until he was too full to want anything else from her. She would bring snacks to him while he watched TV in the evenings. Then she would slip into the bedroom once he dozed off. Jeff would snore on the sofa until morning in front of the dark TV screen. He reminded her of an overfed bull being readied for Christmas. It was nearly repulsive, yet Bonnie didn't know how to break this twisted knot. The woman greeted her husband mechanically after work, immediately seating him at the table and hurrying to feed him his fill, making sure to have dinner with the children before he arrived. Thoughts of divorce grew more frequent. Though scared of managing alone with the children, even her lack of work experience didn't worry her. With her profession, she could feed herself and her children. Bonnie realised how Jeff had made her normal thoughts about food seem abnormal. Loving meant cooking with care for loved ones, choosing the best ingredients with pleasure. What of this division of people into those worthy of meat and the useless lackeys who shouldn't be fed it? Such a fascinating categorization, either a philosophical doctrine or psychological delusion. Clearly no Nobel Prize awaited this discovery about dividing society into first, second and third classes. Jeff and his father had invented this nonsense out of terrible greed. Bonnie shook her head with determination. She would divorce her useless husband and buy a new life with Amelie and Billy. While the children prepared for bed, Jeff fell asleep as usual after a hearty dinner, his snores filling the living room. Bonnie didn't want to wake him for explanations. Everything could wait until morning. While the house slept peacefully, she packed his things. It was her apartment. She let him move in with his mother. By 6 a.m, 3 heavy suitcases stood in the hallway. Bonnie checked the closet one last time. If she'd forgotten anything, Jeff could collect it later. Her aversion to her husband peaked at that moment. She couldn't bear another minute with him. Jeff woke up smugly, ready to criticise Bonnie for overfeeding him the previous evening, causing him to fall asleep before his marital duty. Then he noticed the suspicious suitcases by the door. "Going somewhere, Bonnie? What's this about?" Bonnie entered the living room, sat in the armchair, and gathered her thoughts to speak clearly. "These are your things, Jeff. Everything I've managed to pack. I'm filing for divorce, today." Jeff was genuinely shocked by his wife's behaviour. She's lost her mind, getting too bold. Must have woken up on the wrong side of the bed, he thought, determined to teach her sense immediately. Not wanting to delay the lesson, Jeff grabbed a kitchen towel from the ironing board. He swung to strike Bonnie's face, intent on putting her in her place before she got too defiant. Bonnie merely smiled faintly. She had crossed the Rubicon and was ready to burn the remaining bridges. Without scenes, fights or scandals. Jeff's blood ran cold when he heard her voice. She had never spoken to him like that before. "I never noticed, Jeff, that you have trouble hearing. Did you misunderstand my words? You will leave this house with your belongings right now. I'll even wrap up some food for you, so you won't go hungry on the way." Jeff suddenly went limp. He clearly realised that Bonnie was not joking. She was kicking him out in earnest. He hadn't expected such a turn from his usually docile wife. He was confused, unsure how to behave or what to do next. Seeing him surrender, Bonnie smirked. "It won't be difficult for me to put your suitcases outside without your help. I'll handle things with the children. And don't let your shadow darken this doorway again. It's over between us, definitively and irrevocably. I won't live another day with a man like you. I'm done." Jeff had no fight left in him. Gone was his desire to command her in his usual gruff voice. Before him stood a stranger, a woman he no longer recognised. Unable to predict what she might do next, he retreated from this battlefield without waiting for a more dramatic finale. He quietly carried the suitcases one by one into the entryway, accepted the lunch bundle from his wife's hands, and absently sniffed it. The package smelled enticingly of Bonnie's signature cutlets. Jeff wanted to pinch himself. Surely this was just his worst nightmare. The illusion shattered with a thunderous slam as Bonnie shut the door behind him. Jeff's mother, sitting on a bench near the entrance of her house, couldn't believe her eyes. Her son Jeff stormed through their yard with his suitcase, red as a tomato and seething with anger. as if scorched by the summer sun. He marched up to his mother and immediately began berating her.
"Still sitting here with nothing to do? Let's go home. I'm hungry after my shift."
The woman, long accustomed to avoiding unnecessary questions, scurried ahead of her son. She quietly opened the apartment door and hurried to the kitchen. Though the refrigerator was nearly empty, she could make pasta. Seeing the finished dish, Jeff's face reddened further.
"Mother, you have a grown man sitting here."
"I live on my pension, Jeff. How can I afford delicacies? I've always tried not to burden you, never asked for help. Even after working at the factory my whole life, the state didn't give me much for my old age. But don't worry, I manage. Everyone has such a pension nowadays."
Jeff couldn't stand his mother's chatter. An empty pasta, even without cheese, irritated him even more. He hadn't eaten such awful food since kindergarten. Now he had to adjust to this bewildering new life. Let Bonnie cool down. He'd find a way to get her back in his possession. Meanwhile, Bonnie savoured her freedom. She quietly pulled some meat from the soup, added it to the pasta, and fed her little family. She kept reflecting to herself. The air in the apartment seemed fresher, and the children hadn't even asked where their father had gone. With his departure, everyone felt happier, more peaceful, more serene. Even fate seemed to be on Bonnie's side. Whilst searching online for a pie recipe, she stumbled upon an interesting advertisement. A new seaside hotel was hiring staff. They offered shift work with housing provided. The vacancies included cooks, waiters, and kitchen workers. A note mentioned that the hotel also accommodated preschool children, with a separate camp organised for them. Bonnie completed the online application without any hesitation, silently grateful for her interest in computers during her studying. Though Jeff had disapproved of her hobby, he had eventually bought her a friend's old, worn-out laptop after she convinced him she'd use it to find new recipes for him. As luck would have it, she didn't need to visit any employment agencies. 2 days ago, Bonnie received an email invitation for an interview. The branch office of this major coastal hotel chain was located in a modern business centre. How far Bonnie was from such a business-like beauty. However, she opened the door to the office confidently, and with equal confidence, she answered all the questions of an employee from Personnel Services. After listening to Bonnie, the woman fell silent for a moment before delivering her verdict. "You have no practical work experience, which is a significant disadvantage, but we're willing to try you as a kitchen worker. You'll work under the cook's supervision, and we'll see how it goes. Your children can stay with you in our staff dormitory. We'll provide you with a separate room. Expenses for their accommodation will be deducted from your wages, but you'll still earn enough. Your shift starts May 25th, and the season ends September 25th. Bonnie flew home as if on wings, eager to tell her children the wonderful news. They had never seen the sea before. 4 months on the south coast. It was like a fairy tale. She didn't spare a thought for Jeff, his ultimatum, or her recent discoveries about him. She erased her husband from her life with a single stroke of her mental pen. She stepped into her new life with cheer and confidence. The hotel on the shore of the gentle sea exceeded all expectations Bonnie and her children had of paradise. Brand new and preparing to welcome its first tourists, it was magnificent. White stone buildings cascaded down to the beach amid subtropical greenery. Mature palm trees stood like exotic sentinels along the alleys. Secluded gazebos nestled in the thick vegetation on the slopes. Guests would arrive in a week to be served by 5 restaurants and bars. Bonnie was assigned to the vegetable preparation area. Despite the kitchen's abundance of modern appliances, vegetables were still peeled and washed the traditional way. Only afterward were they precisely cut with sharp knives and choppers, Large potatoes, long red carrots, pungent onions and round beets in shades from fuchsia to Bordeaux, soaked in large containers, cleaning off garden soil. Bonnie wasn't afraid of hard work. Though her eyes were fearful, her hands were capable. The kitchen team was competent, with no time for idle chat, only time to keep moving. A shuttle bus took everyone to the dormitory in the evenings. The children would be waiting for Bonnie there. Their small but cosy room was filled with peace and warm conversation. Despite their exhaustion, the whole trio would head straight to the sea. It was too cold for swimming. The waves rolled majestically to shore, just as they had for centuries, and the children were enchanted by the salty waters, walking until sunset before dinner. Thank goodness, the dormitory food was excellent. Bonnie wouldn't have had the energy to cook for the children here too. On opening day, from the restaurant windows, they watched a stream of cars bringing vacationers onto the property. Agile young men efficiently carried luggage to the buildings, while a well-dressed, cheerful crowd chatted animatedly at reception. Adjusting her headscarf, Bonnie was hurrying to accounting with paperwork when she noticed an unusual sight. There were 3 of them, a man in his 40s and 2 elderly people. She knew instinctively they were his parents. A charming elderly woman in a lace-trimmed silk dress, and her husband in light-coloured shorts, a palm tree printed shirt and a Panama hat. Though they made quite a picture, their son seemed completely at ease. He served his parents cool water with orange slices from the lounge bar, and then adjusted his mother's glasses and kissed her cheek. He rushed to handle their reservation. Bonnie felt a twinge of envy. Her own mother was no longer alive. However, smiling at the touching scene, she hurried to complete her task. She soon forgot about the devoted trio. The next day, the same caring son entered the kitchen through the back door. He was looking for the manager, who had gone to meet suppliers. The chef came out instead to speak with him, and he made his request. "My mother turns 80 in 3 days. This trip is my gift to her and my father. I'd like to order a special, unique cake from you. I've detailed everything here, including the ingredients needed." The chef unfolded the paper, read it slowly, moving her lips silently, then handed it back. "That's impossible. 1 cake with such a combination, meringue and soufflé, jelly, fondant, caramel, praline, marzipan, various types of biscuits, 3 kinds of cream, 2 glazes and exotic syrups for soaking. How do you know so much about confectionery? Are you a restaurateur?" "Actually, I'm an inventor and scientist, but my mother is a master confectioner. Though she only practiced her art at home, she spent her career as a cook on my father's team. I've been fortunate to enjoy her creations all my life. Now, I'd like her to receive a special cake as a surprise for her anniversary." The chef smiled. "You think too highly of our restaurant service. Such a masterpiece is beyond us. There are hundreds of tourists vacationing in the hotel right now. Your order is too unique for us to break away from our tasks and devote time to it. Besides, we don't have a pastry chef of that calibre on our staff." Later, Bonnie couldn't explain why. She, an unwitting witness to this conversation, stepped forward and asked to see the recipe. After all, she had only opened the back door for this man when he knocked. Where did this boldness come from? But when Bonnie read the description of the cake, she somehow knew she could handle it. Not even the chef's saucer-wide eyes embarrassed her. Her boss merely shook her head and said, "We'll relieve you of your other work for 24 hours. Everything else is now your responsibility. One more thing. Purchase the ingredients yourself, if you're so ambitious. Our service won't have time to deal with all that." The man, who had been listening attentively, immediately brightened. "I have my car here. I'll take you to all the necessary stores myself whenever it's convenient. There's not much time left before the anniversary, and my parents can manage without me for now. I've had them together for over 50 years. My father is an archaeologist.
My ancestors were all on expeditions. I was born after they had already settled at home."
He trailed off mid-sentence, looking at Bonnie inquisitively, while she gazed questioningly at her chief. Sighing heavily, the boss concluded,
"All right, Bonnie, I'll give you another half a day tomorrow for grocery shopping. I'm curious myself whether such a cake is possible outside of confectionery fantasies. Go for it."
At 8 o'clock the next morning, Bonnie and her unusual client were driving down a winding mountain road to a large local supermarket for cake ingredients. After about 10 minutes of silence, the man extended his hand and introduced himself.
"I'm Malcolm, and you're Bonnie, right? I was thinking we should try the southern local market instead. Something tells me the butter, milk and fruit there will be more natural and higher quality. We have plenty of time. Let's go for a little walk."
Bonnie flinched involuntarily, which didn't escape Malcolm's notice.
"Did I say something wrong?"
She smiled softly. No, it's fine. It's just that, because of circumstances, I don't like markets, or even that word." Malcolm regarded her with curiosity.
"Tell me why. We have quite a bit of time during our drive. I promise whatever you tell me will stay between us."
Bonnie hesitated. Telling a stranger about her troubles seemed unthinkable, but she was so tired of suffering alone in this cauldron of mental anguish, so worn down by adult loneliness. These weren't things she could explain to her children. So unexpectedly, watching the mountain scenery flicker past the window, she found herself telling everything to her companion, who proved to be an incredible listener. After her story, Malcolm remained silent for a long while, lost in his own thoughts, before finally speaking. She could only listen and try to remember his words.
"I'm very lonely too, Bonnie. Alone in my personal life. My wife left me when she learned I couldn't have children because of radiation exposure. I'm a nuclear physicist working in a classified facility. I don't regret anything. I live by the principle of who else but me."
Then Bonnie interrupted him. "And I try to survive, raising my children in difficult conditions. But when I come home from work, 2 sons embrace me, and all my sadness vanishes like magic." "Oh, I'm sorry, Malcolm. Forgive me. I didn't mean to hurt you with my words. A woman with her children always has light in her window, even in troubled times. That's all I meant." Malcolm couldn't understand why he felt compelled to be so open with her. This lovely woman awakened an unfamiliar warmth in him. He wanted to protect her, to shield her from all hardship, to stay by her side. He'd never felt such things, even for his wife. How had Bonnie so quickly found the key to his heart? After sharing their life stories, both realised they felt remarkably comfortable together. Bonnie calmly visited the market she usually avoided, selecting the finest ingredients for the cake. Meanwhile, Malcolm bought her a luxurious bouquet of roses. He earned well and hadn't spent money on a woman in ages, having only pampered his elderly parents. On their way back to the hotel, they stopped first at her dormitory. Bonnie wanted to put the roses in a vase to keep them fresh. She invited Malcolm to see how she and her children had settled in, and his heart ached again. The small room was somehow both homely and cosy, simple yet charming. He suddenly longed for Bonnie to welcome him home from work, to check his daily accomplishments, to serve him dinner, with or without meat. It didn't matter. At the hotel, they encountered Malcolm's parents walking along the shady alley. He quickly put his finger to his lips before introducing his companion, hinting that the cake remained a surprise. His mother gave him a subtle wink. His father discreetly raised his thumb. Malcolm's mood soared even higher. He handed his parents a bag of strawberries to take to their room, then carried the heavy bags into the kitchen with Bonnie. The anniversary was only 2 days away. Bonnie had poured her heart into what was clearly becoming a confectionery masterpiece. She had always loved the dessert classes most at culinary school. Malcolm visited the kitchen several times during her work, always with the same message. "Bonnie, do it however you think best. I trust you completely." Bonnie shooed him from the kitchen, insisting she would handle it herself and that outsiders weren't allowed. But Malcolm persisted. On his third visit at the end of her workday, he had a question. "I'll take you home to the dormitory. My parents are going to a live music concert at the hotel tonight. Perhaps we could all go along with your children. Go out and get ice cream?" But Bonnie, exhausted from working on the cake, had to decline. "Malcolm, let's save the treats for another day. I've been on my feet all day and I'm tired. I can't even take the children to the sea today." Malcolm was disappointed but didn't make a fuss. This woman was steadily claiming more space in his heart. For the first time, Malcolm couldn't enjoy his parents' rapturous appreciation of the saxophone. His thoughts dwelled only on Bonnie. He was amazed how she occupied his mind, appearing before him in light blue jeans and a light-coloured checkered shirt, making it impossible to focus on anything else. He tossed and turned all night, waiting for morning, when he and his parents would go to the restaurant for breakfast. They planned to present the cake at lunch. The waitresses had decorated the hall with balloons that Malcolm and Bonnie had bought the day before. The birthday girl arrived in full splendour, looking charming in her elegant summer dress, wide-brimmed hat and delicate sandals. Her eyes sparkled with warmth and joy. Everyone in the hall could see this was a woman who had lived a life filled with love. While her husband and son attended to her, Bonnie wheeled out her confectionery creation. Even a novice could tell this was a cake crafted with extraordinary imagination. On a beautiful platter stood a mound of ancient Scythian treasures. Chests filled with edible gold and silver, precious stones, helmets and chocolate spears. Above it all stood a sorceress in a soft pink caramel dress, holding a ladle. Flirtatious, graceful, lovely. Everyone immediately understood this composition represented the celebrant. The elderly woman burst into tears. "Darling, you created this miracle yourself. It's a jewel of confectionery. I could never make something like this." She gave Bonnie a heartfelt embrace. "Now, my friends, let's not waste time. The speeches can wait. Let's taste this cake. I've always had such a sweet tooth." While everyone in the hall shared pieces of Bonnie's sweet creation, she tried to slip quietly into the back rooms. Malcolm caught her at the last moment. "Bonnie, thank you so much. This is absolutely divine. I brought 3 pieces for you and the children. I'm sorry I couldn't get more." Bonnie turned, tears in her eyes. "My husband would have eaten all 3 pieces himself, Malcolm. He wouldn't have thought of me or the children. I never knew men could be like you, so thoughtful and generous." She sighed and disappeared into the kitchen. Malcolm knew this wasn't the moment to follow her, to speak, to offer comfort. He had another week at the hotel, and he would dedicate it to this poor woman. He would show her that the right man strives to make his woman happy, not take from her. And soon it all happened. They grew close quickly, disregarding their guilty consciences and conventional morality. Before meeting him, Bonnie hadn't known love could be so consuming, that she could lose herself so completely in another person, experiencing this otherworldly feeling of mutual need. She had never imagined a man could cherish a woman with words that flowed like sweet streams from his soul. On her day off, after the cake triumph, she invited Malcolm to her dormitory while the children were at the park. She embraced him as soon as the door closed. He didn't resist, didn't question, didn't judge. It was their pure happiness. Malcolm then fell into a deep sleep, and Bonnie lay staring at the ceiling. She remembered her mother. Already seriously ill, her mother had once called Bonnie to her bedside for a heart-to-heart talk. "Daughter, it's clear that soon you'll be alone.
I'm not going to make it, but somehow I know you won't repeat my bitter loneliness without a man, won't spend the rest of your life moping around, wetting your pillow with tears. Don't think I'm teaching you anything wrong. When you meet your man, test your feelings through physical love. I'm not talking about sin, but something else. If you feel drawn to embrace him, if he reaches out to you too, don't hesitate. Let tenderness guide you.
Now Bonnie felt infinitely sorry that her first experience had been with Jeff. With Malcolm, everything was different. She had known she wanted to be with him from the moment she accepted his bouquet of roses, while they worked on the cake for his mother when she invited him to the dormitory today. In earthly love, shame falls silent. The need to be loved comes first. Bonnie didn't even dwell on the fact that they only had 6 days left. Then Malcolm and his parents would leave, and she would return to her closet with unpeeled vegetables. Cinderella would be left without her beloved prince. She would have to live on memories of their love. Such was her fate, in her mind, and she agreed to that. Meanwhile, Jeff was restless. As he pondered about all the situation, realization struck him. Fine, let Bonnie go to the market. Let her buy whatever food she wants. Let everyone in the house eat meat. He had agreed to work tirelessly for them, but Bonnie must return to the stall of their family. He hadn't realized she was such a stubborn creature, and the most strange was that she vanished. He had visited her apartment twice already. No one there. It seemed impossible. She couldn't have disappeared into thin air with the children. After a few more days of hesitation, Jeff used the keys to their shared apartment. Fortunately, she hadn't thought to take them from him. The man was going to investigate. There must be some clue to where his wife was hiding. He entered the apartment with trepidation. It was clean and empty. Only a laptop sat on the table, and Jeff had an idea. Perhaps he'd find her traces there. Jeff himself was clueless about computers. He only knew how to use the TV and refrigerator, but there was a computer enthusiast at his work. He'd help with this task. His colleague quickly examined the laptop. Bonnie hadn't set any passwords, and immediately found her recent searches and correspondence. Even slow-witted Jeff understood immediately. His rebellious wife had secured a job at a new seaside resort hotel, and he would soon be on vacation. He'd surprise her and the kids. He had every right to go to the sea. At that moment, Bonnie was giving Malcolm a final embrace. His parents tactfully stepped aside, pretending to get water for the journey, while she could barely breathe against him. Her tears had dried up. She steeled herself, whispering internally, "Don't show anything. Don't upset him. It's over. Not all dreams come true. You can handle this. You'll manage." Malcolm studied her face for a moment and asked, "Why do you keep moving your lips, as if holding back words? Have you convinced yourself, silly girl, that I'm leaving you for good?" Bonnie nodded silently. Malcolm pulled her close again and whispered in her ear, "I just need to settle things at work. I have so much accumulated vacation time that I can spend the whole summer with you by the sea, but I have much bigger plans. I don't want to be with you only in the summer. I want to fall asleep and wake up with you every day on the same pillow. You'll come with me. I have a house in the academic town, and I want you to be its mistress. While I'm away, please start the divorce proceedings. Why wait? I don't want the woman I love to remain married to a stranger. And please, talk gently with the children about how they'd feel about me becoming their father. I want to take you far from this town. I've already told my parents I want to marry you. They're overjoyed that you have children. They'll have grandchildren to dote on." Time inexorably counted down. The final minutes. Long farewells, long tears. That's how people describe separations. Yet these two loving hearts shed no tears. There was only a slight sadness, trembling within their great happiness. They felt grateful for everything they had shared and were full of hope for their future together. Bonnie watched as the car headed north. It was her day off, but the woman decided to head to the kitchen immediately rather than wait for tomorrow. Work would help distract her from her thoughts and rainbow-coloured plans. Within minutes, Bonnie transformed into her usual self, a quiet woman with bright eyes, methodically cleaning potatoes. By 8 o'clock, Bonnie felt exhausted but satisfied, conveying her impressive stock of cleaned vegetables. They could catch the last service bus back to the hotel, where light already glowed invitingly from their room window. The children must be home, probably watching TV instead of sleeping. Climbing the metal ladder quickly, Bonnie opened the door and froze. At the table sat Jeff, chewing on a pie and sipping coffee from a large mug. He turned at the sound and sneered. "Here comes my wifey home. Had your fun at last? Come in, darling. Tell me what you've been up to. Leaving your legitimate husband?" "What are you doing here?" Bonnie demanded. "Ran out of meat at the market back home." Jeff lunged at her with unexpected agility, like a grizzly bear, his breath hot on her face.
"I'm a legitimate guest at your hotel. I booked a room. I've been watching you for a day. You were too distracted to notice. Saw you carrying on with some man. Shameless. But I'll forgive your lover and your games. Let's go to my room. Time to work on baby number 3. You like children, don't you, wife? Ready to wait me up from work? Cook meal for your dear husband?"
Bonnie was overwhelmed. How had he found her? How had he gotten here? Jeff seemed to read her thoughts.
"Your laptop gave you away and people helped me figure it out. Just showed my passport at reception. Said I wanted to surprise my wife because our wedding anniversary is in 3 days. The managers were quite helpful."
Bonnie's mind raced as she desperately sought a way to escape, to drive her husband away. He became increasingly insistent, but Bonnie refused his advances. Disgusted, she gathered all her strength and pushed her husband away, threatening to call the guards if he didn't leave her room immediately. Jeff glared at her, but obeyed, leaving with a parting threat that he would continue pursuing her until she realized she was his destiny. Alone now, Bonnie tried calling Malcolm, but his phone was out of range. She felt helpless, too drained even to cry. She couldn't tell if Malcolm's silence was mere unfortunate timing, or if he had deliberately cut her from his life. The next morning, Bonnie filed for divorce electronically. She would never again submit to Jeff's will. Meanwhile, Malcolm was deeply troubled. A major scientific experiment was scheduled at work in the coming weeks, and his presence was essential. His colleagues depended on him completely. For the first time, his devotion to work created conflict. His heart was torn between love and duty, unable to abandon either his colleagues at this crucial moment or Bonnie. He called to explain his delay, but she responded with cool detachment, as if she had expected this. When he tried to explain the emergency, she cut the conversation short, promising to call back later to discuss everything. She never did, not that day nor the next. Finally, Malcolm had no choice but to immerse himself in his scientific project. Working day and night, he would return home so exhausted that he would only collapse into bed and fall into deep sleep. The week with Jeff felt like imprisonment for Bonnie, though she had one small mercy. He no longer attempted to get close to her. He occupied himself with the children, went to the sea and slept in his own room. To outsiders they appeared like a normal family, celebrating their wedding anniversary. On their anniversary day, he bought her a bouquet of daisies and got home the next day. Bonnie tried not to dwell on Malcolm's silence. He had his beloved physics now. Hadn't he himself joked about being married to protons and neutrons? What had she expected? That he would abandon everything for their love? It seemed unrealistic, even absurd. Though she missed him terribly, She refused to call him. If they were meant to be together, it would happen. Until then, she would wait and just work. A week after Jeff's departure, Bonnie's career took an unexpected turn. Another cake order arrived, remarkably similar to her first success. An enthusiastic mother wanted to organise a children's party at the hotel, bubbling with creative ideas. She envisioned an elaborate cake shaped like a red car, accompanied by various pastries, cupcakes, muffins, cookies, and specialty desserts. She insisted on only the finest, most exclusive treats for her child's table, regardless of cost. "We can't dedicate that much time to your order. The hotel is at capacity, and we're barely managing our buffet duties. Though we have bakeries at our resort, we're short-staffed during peak hours," the manager explained, but paused when the chef whispered something. "However, we do have one exceptional staff member. I've been considering moving them to the pastry department." The customer's eyes lit up. "We'll meet all your conditions. When can we speak with this pastry chef?" They summoned Bonnie immediately, and she agreed to help the devoted mother realise her vision. The children's party was magical, complete with exciting entertainment, treats, a big red car, cakes, and everything else on the list. When the customer discovered that Bonnie's children were staying at the hotel, she immediately included them in the party, and, after celebration, she handed Bonnie a thick envelope. "My son was happy today, thanks to you. I sincerely wish that everything works out the way you want it to. You are wonderful." To Malcolm, the airplane seemed to crawl like a turtle through the sky. He counted down not hours but minutes until he would see his beloved. At the hotel, however, devastating news awaited him. Bonnie had broken her contract a month before its end. He frantically searched the hotel for any information about her, going mad with despair. He cursed physics and all its scientific mysteries. Just as he was about to fly to Bonnie's hometown to search for her, a woman from the computer game room beckoned him over. "I can't watch you suffer like this. I helped Bonnie submit her electronic divorce petition. Her husband showed up here. I don't know what happened between them, but Bonnie wasn't herself while he was here. She left suddenly, without explanation. I have a copy of the divorce petition with her address. If you care about her, go find her. She's a good person. I know you'll be happy together." Bonnie was cooking dumplings when the doorbell rang unexpectedly. As she walked to open it, she wondered who it could be. She had already dealt with Jeff by presenting him with the divorce petition and threatening legal action if he ever bothered her again. Jeff had retreated like a coward, throwing one last bitter remark. "Do you think you're a princess? But who needs you with 2 children? Who would take on such a burden? I'm not your helper anymore, and just so you know, anyone will be happy to marry me because I am a man. And that's it. You lost your last chance." When Bonnie opened the door, she stepped back in shock. There stood her Malcolm, holding a large bouquet of roses and several packages. "How did you find me?" Bonnie wanted to shout down the hallway, but her lips barely moved from the rush of emotions. He stepped forward and embraced her tightly. "Why did you run away? I nearly lost my mind when I couldn't find you at the hotel." Bonnie, refusing to hide her feelings, looked straight into his eyes and explained. "My husband came to see me, and I feared he would always hover over me. When you didn't respond, I thought this was all self-deception, that you really didn't need me. You had your physics at home, maybe even another woman. I thought I was just a vacation romance to you." Malcolm smiled. "What made you think you should make such decisions for both of us? Let me just call my parents to tell them I found you safely. Then we can eat. I'm starving. Do you have an extra plate and fork for me? I bought plenty of groceries." Bonnie suddenly remembered the dumplings on the stove and rushed to the kitchen, hearing Malcolm talking to his parents. "Mum, don't worry. Everything's fine. I found her. Tell Dad the good news.
When are we coming? As soon as Bonnie's packed. We haven't decided what she wants to bring yet.
Malcolm's voice trailed off, and Bonnie turned around. There he stood in the kitchen doorway. Her man. Her love. She saw such adoration in his eyes that her knees weakened. They moved toward each other, once again lost in their magical connection. Bonnie might have contemplated the happiness awaiting her, but one thought crossed her mind. How fortunate it was that Jeff's selfishness with food had inadvertently led her to true happiness. This is how a fasting diet can sometimes lead to a bright future rather than mere sadness.